The old human's eye exploded, spattering hot blood and clear jelly across Horace's face as Russell Shaw drove his knife deeper into the socket. "This is why it's illegal to approach a human," Russell growled, wiping his blade clean on the dying man's jacket. "We don't take kindly to your kind." Horace swallowed hard, forcing down the bile rising in his throat. He had known studying the war-ravaged humans firsthand would be dangerous, but he never expected to witness such brutality mere hours after his illegal arrival on Earth. Disguised as one of them, the young Pandronian historian watched in mute horror as Russell rifled through the dead man's pockets, pocketing a handful of bullets in a sealed envelope. "Ration documents," Russell explained, noticing Horace's shocked expression. "Worth killing for these days." He kicked the corpse into a sewage-choked gutter running through the ruins of old New York. Horace said nothing. What could he say? This was the human's world now, a desolate hellscape born from decades of total war with his people. A war that supposedly ended in an uneasy armistice. But seeing the devastation firsthand, Horace wondered if the fighting had ever truly stopped. Russell looked him up and down, eyes narrowing. "You're not from around here, are you?" Horace's heart raced, wondering if his disguise had somehow failed. But the grizzled rebel just shook his head and sighed. "Doesn't matter. If you want to survive this mess, you stick with me and do exactly as I say. Understand?" Horace nodded eagerly, falling into step beside his new guide as they ventured deeper into the crumbling city. He knew he was risking everything by being here, consorting with the enemy, chasing the truth behind a war that never quite added up. But he had to know, had to understand the unbreakable spirit that kept these humans going after losing everything. And if the answers he found condemned his own people's actions, so be it. There was more at stake now than blind loyalty to old hatreds. The future of two civilizations hung in the balance, and Horace would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As they made their way through the rubble-strewn streets, Horace's mind raced with the implications of what he had just witnessed. The casual brutality, the desperate struggle for survival. This was the legacy of his people's arrogance. Lost in thought, he nearly collided with Russell as the rebel came to an abrupt halt in front of a nondescript building. "We're here," Russell grunted, pushing aside a rusted metal door to reveal a dimly lit interior. Horace followed him inside, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the gloom. The room was crowded with makeshift furniture and stacks of salvaged equipment, but what caught Horace's attention was the woman hunched over a flickering computer screen in the corner. "Asha," Russell called out, "I've got someone here you'll want to meet." The woman looked up, her dark eyes narrowing as she took in Horace's unfamiliar face. "Another stray?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Not quite," Russell replied. "Says he's here to learn the truth about the war. Figured you might have some insights to share." Asha stood, walking over to study Horace more closely. "Is that so? And what makes you think I'd share anything with a stranger?" Horace met her gaze steadily. "Because I believe that the truth has been hidden for too long, that both our peoples have suffered from lies and deception, and that maybe if we work together, we can find a way to end this cycle of violence." Asha's expression softened slightly, and she nodded. "Bold words, but if you really want to know the truth, you'd better be prepared for what it might cost you." She led him over to the computer, typing in a series of commands. The screen flickered, then displayed a dense wall of text. "These are classified Pandronian files," she explained, "stolen from one of their outposts. They detail how your people had been monitoring our progress, how they engineered the conflict that brought us to this point." Horace's breath caught in his throat as he scanned the documents. The evidence was damning. The Pandronians' fear of humanity's rapid advancement, the covert operations to destabilize Earth's governments, the manipulation of both sides into all-out war, and the hints of an even greater threat to come, a final plot to eradicate the human survivors once and for all. He looked up at Asha, seeing the anger and pain in her eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I had no idea." "Few do," she replied grimly, "but apologies won't undo what's been done. If we want to prevent an even greater catastrophe, we need to act, and I think I know where to start." She brought up a map on the screen, zooming in on a location marked with a pulsing red dot. "The old government archives in D.C., If there's any more information about this Pandronian conspiracy, it'll be there. But the journey won't be easy. We'll have to cross a lot of hostile territory to reach it. Horus nodded, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. I understand, but I'm with you, no matter what it takes. We have to find the truth, for both our peoples. Asha studied him for a long moment, then extended her hand. Then let's get started. We've got a long road ahead of us, and not much time to waste. As Horus clasped her hand, sealing their newfound alliance, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the brink of something much larger than himself. The secrets they uncovered could reshape the future of two civilizations, but only if they survived long enough to bring them to light. The journey to Washington, D.C. was grueling. Horus and Asha navigated through the ruins of once great cities, dodging roving bands of scavengers and automated Pandronian security drones. As they approached the outskirts of the former capital, Horus felt a growing unease. Something's not right, he whispered to Asha as they crouched behind a crumbling wall. The archives loomed before them, a monolithic structure of concrete and steel that had somehow withstood the ravages of war. Asha's eyes narrowed. You're right, it's too quiet. They made their way inside, the eerie silence broken only by the crunch of debris beneath their feet. Horus's heart raced as they located the central data hub. Asha's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. Got it, she hissed, plugging in a data stick. But we need to move, now. The blare of alarms shattered the stillness. Horus grabbed the data stick as Asha yanked him towards the exit. They burst out into chaos. General Korzin's troops had materialized, weapons trained on the archives. Run! Asha shouted, pulling Horus down a side alley as bullets whizzed past. They sprinted through the labyrinth of ruined streets, the sounds of pursuit never far behind. Exhausted and battered, they finally reached the hidden rebel base. Russell greeted them with a grim nod, leading them to a room where other resistance fighters huddled around a makeshift war table. Horus plugged in the data stick, and the room fell silent as the evidence of Pandronian machinations unfolded before them. Murmurs of disbelief and anger rippled through the gathering. We have to warn my people, Horus said, his voice thick with shame and grit. This false flag attack, it will destroy any hope of peace. The rebel leaders exchanged wary glances. One spat on the ground. Why should we trust the word of an alien? Russell stepped forward. Because without trust, we're no better than those who started this war. I've seen this one in action. He's risked everything to uncover the truth. After heated debate, the council agreed to a daring plan, a mission to Pandronia itself. As volunteers were assembled, alarms blared through the base. General Korzin's forces had found them. The next minutes were a blur of gunfire and explosions. Horus found himself half carrying a wounded Russell towards their escape route. Go! Russell gasped, shoving Horus away. Complete the mission. It's bigger than any of us. Horus hesitated, but Asha grabbed his arm. We have to move, now! They raced towards the hidden rebel ship, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Horus tensed, ready for a fight, but the Pandronian female raised her hands in a gesture of peace. I'm Zara, she said, and I'm here to help. Horus and Asha exchanged a wary glance. The countdown to catastrophe ticked away in Horus's mind as he weighed their options. Trust a stranger or risk capture, and with it, the fate of two worlds. Horus locked eyes with Zara, his mind racing. The Pandronian female's unexpected appearance could be their salvation or their doom. He glanced at Asha, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. We don't have much time, Zara said, her voice low and urgent. There's a cloaked ship waiting nearby. It's our best chance to reach Pandronia undetected. Horus hesitated for a split second before making his decision. Lead the way. They followed Zara through a maze of debris-strewn alleys, the sounds of battle growing fainter behind them. As they rounded a corner, a sleek vessel shimmered into view, its outline wavering like a mirage. Once aboard, Zara's hands flew across the control panel. The ship hummed to life, lifting off silently as its cloaking field re-engaged. Horus felt a momentary pang of vertigo as Earth fell away beneath them. I'm part of an underground movement, Zara explained as she piloted the craft. We've been working to expose the truth about the war for years. Asha's eyes narrowed. And why should we trust you? Zara met her gaze steadily. Because I've seen the same files you have, the ones proving our government engineered this conflict. Horace pulled out the data stick, its weight suddenly seeming far heavier than its size. You mean these? Zara nodded. Those files confirm what many of us have long suspected. Our leaders feared humanity's technological progress. They saw your potential as a threat to Pandronian dominance. The journey to Pandronia passed in a blur of tense silence and furtive planning. As they approached the alien world, Zara's rebel contacts helped them slip past the planetary defenses. They landed at a hidden base carved into the side of a purple-hued mountain. There, they were greeted by a tall, imposing Pandronian with piercing silver eyes. Welcome, he said, his voice rich and resonant. I am Tauren, and you must be the human who has risked everything to bring us the truth. Asha stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. I am, and I want to know what you plan to do with it. Tauren's expression softened. We plan to save both our peoples from further bloodshed. He led them to a command center bustling with activity. Holographic displays flickered with data streams and surveillance footage. Many Pandronians have grown disillusioned since learning of our government's treachery, Tauren explained. But the leadership moved quickly to crush dissent. They've allied with extremist groups, preparing a false flag attack to reignite the war. Horace felt a chill run down his spine. How do we stop them? Tauren's eyes gleamed. We expose them. Supreme Leader Maltuk is giving a public address soon. We'll use that opportunity to broadcast the truth to all Pandronians. He turned to Horace. Your hacking skills will be crucial in bypassing the broadcast security protocols. Asha stepped forward. I can provide intel on the likely staging grounds for their attack on Earth. As they finalized the plan, Asha pulled Horace aside. Her expression was a mix of anger and hurt. Why did you lie to me? About being human? Horace's shoulders slumped. I was wrong to deceive you, but I never meant any harm. I just wanted to study humanity openly, to understand. Asha searched his face, then nodded slowly. I understand, and I'm sorry too. My own prejudices nearly blinded me to a true ally. The moment was interrupted by a commotion from the command center. On the main view screen, Supreme Leader Maltuk had begun his address to a crowd of millions. Tauren's technicians worked furiously, probing for weaknesses in the broadcast security. Suddenly, a shout of triumph. We're in! Horace's fingers flew across the alien interface, uploading the damning evidence. Across the capital, public displays flickered and changed. Maltuk's voice cut out, replaced by a stark warning about the impending attack on Earth. The crowd's roar of shock was audible even through the broadcast. Tauren stepped up to a microphone, his voice ringing out. People of Pandronia, you have been deceived, but together we can forge a new path of peace. For a moment, hope surged through Horace. Then Maltuk's face contorted with rage. He barked out a series of harsh commands. Suddenly, explosions rocked the crowd. Panic erupted as hidden extremist agents revealed themselves, weapons drawn. Horace exchanged a grim look with Asha. The broadcast had succeeded, but the fight was far from finished. The crowd's panicked screams filled the air as explosions rocked the capital. Horace watched in horror as Maltuk's agents opened fire, transforming the peaceful gathering into a bloodbath. We need to move, Tauren shouted over the chaos. They'll be coming for us next. As if on cue, the rebel base shuddered under heavy weapons fire. Alarms blared as Pandronian security forces breached the outer defenses. This way, Zara called, leading them down a hidden corridor. The group sprinted through winding passages, the sounds of combat growing closer with each passing moment. They emerged into a hangar bay just as a squad of Maltuk's troops rounded the corner. Zara spun, firing her weapon to cover their retreat. Go! She yelled. I'll hold them off! Horace hesitated, torn between escape and helping Zara. An energy blast seared past his head, singeing his hair. Asha grabbed his arm, dragging him towards a waiting ship. Horace, wait! Tauren called out. We need the data from the central servers. It's our only proof of Maltuk's full plan. Without thinking, Horus sprinted back towards the command center. He could hear Asha cursing behind him as she provided covering fire. The base's systems were in chaos, but Horus's fingers flew across the alien interface. He downloaded the critical files onto a data crystal just as the door exploded inward. A towering Pandronian warrior strode through the smoke, his cybernetic enhancements glowing with terrifying energy. Horus recognized him from intelligence briefings. Kravox, Maltuk's most lethal enforcer. Horus dove behind a console as Kravox's energy blades sliced through the air where he'd been standing. He scrambled away, using his smaller size to evade the warrior's crushing blows. A desperate idea formed in Horus's mind. He led Kravox on a twisting chase through the base's corridors, finally ducking into a maintenance shaft. As Kravox pursued, Horus overloaded the power conduits. Electricity arced through the narrow space, momentarily shorting out Kravox's cybernetics. Horus seized his chance, sprinting back to the hangar. He leapt aboard the ship just as it lifted off, the hull scorched by enemy fire. "I thought you were dead," Asha said, relief evident in her voice despite her stern expression. Horus held up the data crystal. "Not yet, but we need to get this to safety." The ship shuddered as it broke atmosphere, Pandronian fighters in hot pursuit, Tauren piloted with iron will, pushing the craft to its limits. "We've lost contact with our other cells," he reported. "We need somewhere to regroup." Asha leaned forward. "I know a place. There are human resistance bases on the outer moons. If we can reach them—" A flash of light caught Horus's eye. He turned to see Zara slumped against the bulkhead, her chest a mess of burned flesh and circuitry. "No," he whispered, rushing to her side, but it was too late. Zara's eyes fluttered closed for the last time, her final act of sacrifice allowing their escape. Asha placed a hand on Horus's shoulder. "She believed in what we're doing. We can't let her death be in vain." Horus nodded, his grief hardening into persistence. He moved to the ship's systems, using his skills to boost their stealth capabilities. The journey to the outer moons was a gauntlet of close calls and desperate maneuvers. Kravox's fleet seemed to anticipate their every move, forcing them into asteroid fields and radiation storms. Just when it seemed they would be overwhelmed, a swarm of small fighters appeared on their sensors. The human resistance had come to their aid. "This is General Hadrian," a gruff voice crackled over the comm. "Looks like you could use a hand." The human ships engaged Kravox's forces, giving Tauren the opening he needed to slip past the Pandronian blockade. Minutes later, they touched down in a cavernous hangar carved into the lunar rock. As Horus stepped off the ship, he was struck by the mix of human and alien technology surrounding him. This hidden base represented a fusion of their people's strengths and their last, best hope for survival. General Hadrian strode forward to meet them, his weathered face etched with purpose. "I hope you brought something worth all this trouble," he said. Horus held out the data crystal. "Everything we need to expose Maltuk's lies and stop his attack on Earth." Hadrian nodded grimly. "Then let's get to work. We don't have much time." Hadrian's eyes narrowed as he examined the data crystal. "This changes everything. We strike now, before Maltuk can unleash his attack on Earth." Within hours, the lunar base buzzed with activity. Human resistance fighters and Pandronian rebels worked side by side, readying weapons and prepping ships. Horus found himself at a command console, coordinating with Tauren to plan their assault. "We'll need to take out the planetary defense grid first," Hadrian said, pointing to a holographic display of Pandronia. "Without that, we can't get our main force planetside." Asha leaned in, her expression grim. "Those defenses are formidable. It'll take everything we've got." "Then that's what we'll give," Hadrian replied. He turned to address the assembled fighters. "This is our moment. For Earth, for Pandronia, for a future without tyranny, we end this now." The hangar erupted in cheers. As the rebels boarded their ships, Horus caught Asha's eye. No words were needed. They both knew the stakes. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Pandronia, immediately under fire from orbital platforms. Hadrian's voice crackled over the comms. "All units, engage! Clear a path for our infiltration team." Horus's hands flew across the controls, guiding their ship through a storm of energy beams and missiles. Ahead, a massive security matrix pulsed with crackling energy. "That's our target," Hadrian growled. "We take that out and—" His words were cut off as their ship rocked violently. Warning klaxons blared. "We're hit!" Asha shouted. "Engines failing!" Hadrian's face set in a mask of dedication. "Get to the escape pods. I'll guide us in." "But sir," Horus began. "That's an order, soldier. Someone has to manual override that matrix. This is our only shot." Horus and Asha sprinted for the pods, the ship shuddering around them. As they jettisoned, Horus watched in horror as Hadrian's ship plunged towards the security matrix. A blinding flash lit up space. When it faded, the matrix was dark. "He did it," Asha whispered. On the planet's surface, alarms blared through Maltuk's stronghold. The Supreme Leader's eyes blazed with fury as he watched the rebel forces breach his defenses. "Kravox," he bellowed, "prepare my ship. We're not finished yet." As chaos engulfed the capital, Horus led a team towards the massive dreadnought looming over the city. Its cannons blazed, decimating rebel positions. "We take that ship. We control the skies," Horus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. They fought their way through waves of Maltuk's elite guards, Horus's hacking skills proving crucial in bypassing security doors. Finally, they burst onto the bridge. A vicious firefight erupted. Horus ducked behind a console, returning fire as he inched towards the main control panel. A stray shot grazed his arm, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. "Maltuk's escaping!" someone shouted. Horus looked up to see an escape pod jettison from the ship. Suddenly, warning lights flashed across every screen. Horus's blood ran cold as he deciphered the Pandronian text. "He set the reactor to overload. We've got minutes before this whole ship goes up." He dove for the controls, fingers flying as he tried to abort the sequence. An energy blade sliced through the air inches from his face. Horus looked up to see Kravox, Maltuk's cybernetically enhanced guard, looming over him. "You will not undo our great work," Kravox snarled, raising his weapon for a killing blow. A burst of weapons fire struck Kravox's side. He staggered back, revealing Asha in the doorway, her gun still smoking. "Hurry!" she shouted. Horus turned back to the controls, sweat beading on his forehead as he raced against time. The reactor countdown ticked ever lower. 3, 2, 1. With a final keystroke, Horus slumped back, exhausted. The alarms fell silent. "You did it," Asha breathed. But their victory was short-lived. New alarms blared as reports flooded in of attacks across Pandronia and human colonies. Maltuk had activated his sleeper cells. Horus exchanged a determined look with Asha. The real battle was only just beginning. As the alarms blared across the captured dreadnought, Horus and Asha shared a grim look. The victory over Maltuk had come at a steep cost, and now his sleeper cells threatened to undo everything they had fought for. "We need to regroup," Asha said, her voice tight with urgency. "The lunar base is our best shot at coordinating a response." They raced back to their transport, weaving through the chaos of Pandronia's capital. As they broke atmosphere, Horus's communications panel lit up with distress signals from human colonies under attack. The journey back to the moon was tense, filled with frantic strategizing and damage reports. When they landed, they found the base in turmoil. Amid the crowd of panicked fighters and technicians, a familiar face caught Horus's eye. "Zaxxon?" he exclaimed, recognizing the Pandronian officer who had once served under Maltuk. Asha's hand flew to her weapon, but Zaxxon raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Please," he said, his voice filled with genuine remorse. "I've come to help." Before Horus could respond, a group of human rebels surrounded Zaxxon, their faces twisted with anger and suspicion. "This traitor has no place here," one shouted, raising his rifle. Asha stepped between them, her voice firm. "Stand down. Zaxxon risked everything to help us overthrow Maltuk. He deserves a chance to explain himself." The next hours were a flurry of tense meetings and heated debates. Zaxxon laid out the extent of the extremist threat, his insider knowledge proving invaluable. Despite lingering mistrust, the rebel leadership reluctantly agreed to grant him asylum. "There's more," Zaxxon said, his eyes grave. The extremists have regrouped in the Grax Nebula under General Vexal. If we can capture him, we can expose the radicals and end this war. Horus studied the holographic map of the nebula, its swirling gases concealing a heavily fortified asteroid base. It's practically a suicide mission, he muttered. Then I'll go alone, Zaxxon declared. Asha shook her head. Not a chance. I'm leading a strike team, and you're coming with us. The journey to the Grax Nebula was fraught with danger. Twice they narrowly avoided extremist patrols, relying on Zaxxon's knowledge of Pandronian tactics to slip past undetected. As they approached the asteroid base, Horus marveled at its imposing defenses. How are we supposed to breach that? He whispered. Asha's eyes gleamed with drive. The old-fashioned way. We fight. The assault on Vexal's stronghold was brutal and chaotic. Horus found himself separated from the others, using his hacking skills to disable security systems as he fought his way deeper into the base. Through his earpiece, he heard the sounds of intense combat as Asha and Zaxxon battled towards the command center. Suddenly, a familiar cold voice cut through the chaos. Surrender, traitors! Horus's blood ran cold. Kravox had survived. He sprinted towards Asha's position, arriving just in time to see Kravox corner her, cybernetic enhancements glowing with murderous intent. Zaxxon stood between them, his hands hovering over a strange device on his belt. Asha, run! Zaxxon shouted. Before she could move, he activated the device. A wave of energy pulsed through the room. Kravox's cybernetics sparked and died, the towering warrior collapsing to the ground. But the pulse didn't stop there. Warning klaxons blared as the base's reactor core began to destabilize. We need to go now, Horus yelled, grabbing Asha's arm. She pulled away. Not without Zaxxon! The Pandronian was struggling to his feet, weakened by the pulse. Leave me, he gasped. Get Vexal and go! Asha hesitated for a split second, then thrust a data drive into Horus's hands. Get this to the ship. It has everything we need to expose Vexal. Before Horus could protest, she shoved him towards the exit and turned back to help Zaxxon. As he ran, Horus heard the sound of explosions behind him. The last thing he saw before the hangar doors sealed was Asha disappearing into a cloud of debris, supporting the injured Zaxxon. Minutes later, their ship rocketed away from the disintegrating asteroid. Horus stared at the tactical display, searching desperately for any sign of escape pods. His heart sank as the seconds ticked by with no contact. Just as he was about to give up hope, a battered shuttle limped into view. Horus's hands shook as he guided it into the docking bay. The airlock cycled, and Zaxxon stumbled out, carrying Asha's limp form in his arms. She saved me, Zaxxon said, his voice thick with emotion. After everything, she still... Horus rushed to help, his medical training kicking in as he assessed Asha's injuries. She was alive, but barely. As they raced back to the lunar base, Horus found himself torn between gratitude for Zaxxon's heroism and fear for Asha's life. The base's medical bay was a flurry of activity as doctors fought to stabilize Asha. Horus paced outside, his mind racing. They had Vexal in custody and the evidence to expose the extremists, but at what cost? A commotion down the hall drew his attention. A group of human rebels confronted Zaxxon, their faces twisted with anger. "This is your fault," one shouted, gesturing towards the medical bay. "How many more have to die before we see you for what you really are?" Horus moved to intervene, but Zaxxon's defeated expression stopped him short. The weight of guilt and responsibility seemed to crush the Pandronian's usually proud bearing. As accusations flew and tensions mounted, Horus realized that the hardest battle was yet to come, not against extremists or armies, but against the hatred and mistrust that threatened to tear their fragile alliance apart. Horus watched helplessly as medics rushed Asha into surgery, her vital signs flickering dangerously on portable monitors. Zaxxon hovered nearby, his alien features twisted with worry. The Pandronian's presence drew suspicious glares from human rebels passing through the medical bay. "You should go," Horus said quietly. "It's not safe for you here." Zaxxon shook his head. "I won't leave her side, not after what she did for me." A commotion erupted in the corridor. Angry voices rose above the din of medical equipment. There he is, the Pandronian spy! A group of human fighters burst into the room, weapons raised. Horus stepped between them and Zaxxon, hands outstretched. Stand down, he ordered. Zaxxon is here as an ally. An ally? One rebel spat. Look what his kind did to Asha, to all of us. The tension in the room crackled like an overloaded power conduit. Zaxxon's shoulders slumped, the weight of guilt evident in every line of his body. Suddenly, the bay doors slid open. A tall, regal Pandronian strode in, flanked by a mixed escort of humans and his own kind. Horus recognized him instantly. Tauren, he breathed. The leader of the new Pandronian interim government raised a hand, silencing the room. I bring news, Tauren announced, his voice resonant. We have uncovered evidence of Maltuk's true depravity. His purge extended far beyond human sympathizers. Many of our own people, scientists, officials, those who dared speak of coexistence, they too were imprisoned or executed. A stunned silence fell over the assembled crowd. Tauren continued, his gaze sweeping the room. We stand at a crossroads. The opportunity exists to reshape our societies, to forge a path of mutual understanding and cooperation. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. I propose a joint human Pandronian council to address our shared concerns: resource allocation, trade agreements, technological exchange. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Horus saw hope and skepticism warring on faces both human and alien. Tauren turned to Zaxxon. Your expertise will be crucial in this endeavor, and as a gesture of goodwill, I extend an invitation to Asha and other rebel leaders to address the Pandronian people alongside our new council. Zaxxon's eyes widened. But Asha, her injuries... You have access to knowledge we long thought lost, Tauren said quietly. Regenerative technologies banned under Maltuk's regime. If you can ensure her recovery... Horus watched as conflict played across Zaxxon's features. Finally, the Pandronian nodded. I'll need access to our medical databases, he said. Hours later, Horus stood at the observation window, watching as Zaxxon worked tirelessly over Asha's unconscious form. Pandronian technology beyond his comprehension hummed and pulsed, bathing the room in an otherworldly glow. A human medic approached, her eyes wide. It's incredible, she whispered. Her cells are literally rebuilding themselves. The procedure seemed to last an eternity. Finally, Zaxxon emerged, exhaustion etched into every line of his alien face. She'll live, he said simply, but she needs time to heal. I've placed her in a regenerative stasis. As word spread of Asha's miraculous recovery, Horus sensed a shift in the air. The distrust towards Zaxxon remained, but now tinged with awe, and perhaps a touch of fear at the gap in their technological capabilities. Tauren wasted no time. As Asha slumbered healing, he and Zaxxon threw themselves into the monumental task of human Pandronian reintegration. But for every step forward, violence threatened to drag them back. Reports flooded in of attacks on both human and Pandronian targets. Extremist groups, unwilling to let go of their hatred, lashed out with increasing ferocity. Horus pored over intelligence reports, his stomach churning. A familiar name caught his eye. Kravox, he muttered. He survived. Zaxxon looked up sharply. Impossible! Confirmed sightings, Horus said grimly. He's rallying Pandronian hardliners, building an army of extremists. Tauren's expression hardened. Then we must work faster. Zaxxon, we need to implement heightened security protocols. Safeguard Asha, root out these insurrectionist cells before they can gain more ground. As they raced to maintain order, Horus couldn't shake a gnawing sense of dread. The path to peace stretched before them, fraught with danger. Enemies lurked in the shadows, determined to reignite the flames of hatred. In the medical bay, Asha slept on, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. The habitat's sleek corridors buzzed with activity as delegates from both species hurried to the council chambers. Horus navigated the crowd, his eyes scanning for potential threats. The relocation to this orbital station had been a necessary precaution, but it left him uneasy. Too many unknowns, too many potential weak points. He paused outside the medical bay, peering through the observation window. Asha sat upright on the edge of the bed, her movements fluid and purposeful as she stretched her newly healed limbs. Zaxxon hovered nearby, monitoring her progress with a mix of pride and concern. "You should be resting," Horace heard him say through the intercom. Asha shook her head, a familiar fire in her eyes. "There's no time. The council needs us." As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the station. Horace's hand flew to his weapon as the corridor lights shifted to a pulsing red. Security officers rushed past, their voices tense with urgency. "Breach in Section Gamma. All units respond." Horace burst into the medical bay. "We need to move now." Zaxxon's face paled. "It's not possible. My security protocols have failed," Horace finished grimly. "Kravox is here." They raced through the chaos-filled corridors, Asha matching their pace despite her recent recovery. As they neared the council chambers, the sounds of combat grew louder. Panicked delegates fled in the opposite direction. "Get them to the escape pods," Asha shouted to a nearby security team. She turned to Horace and Zaxxon, her expression resolute. "We need to buy them time." The scene that greeted them in the council chamber was one of carnage. Bodies of human and Pandronian delegates lay scattered across the floor. In the center of the room stood Kravox, his cybernetic enhancements glowing with malevolent energy. A group of fanatical loyalists flanked him, weapons trained on the surviving council members. "Zaxxon," Kravox's voice boomed across the chamber. "Face me, traitor." Zaxxon stepped forward, his own technology humming to life. "This ends now, Kravox." The two Pandronians clashed in a blur of energy and metal. Horace and Asha fought to keep Kravox's soldiers at bay, but they were badly outnumbered. Horace watched in horror as Kravox's augmented strength began to overwhelm Zaxxon. "Asha, we need to fall back," Horace shouted, ducking behind an overturned table. But Asha was already moving. She hurled herself at Kravox, catching him off guard. The moment of distraction was all Zaxxon needed to regain his footing, but it came at a terrible cost. Kravox's cybernetic arm lashed out, catching Asha squarely in the chest. She flew backward, crumpling against the far wall. "No!" Zaxxon's anguished cry echoed through the chamber. What happened next occurred so quickly that Horace could barely process it. Zaxxon reached for a device on his belt, one Horace had never seen before. Energy crackled around the Pandronian's form as he activated it. A wave of devastating force erupted from Zaxxon. Kravox and his loyalists were flung backward, their cybernetic implants sparking and failing. But the destruction didn't stop there. The habitat's systems went haywire, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. "Warning, critical system failure," an automated voice announced. "Evacuation protocols initiated." Horace staggered to his feet, ears ringing from the blast. Zaxxon knelt beside Asha's still form, cradling her head. "We need to go," Horace urged, helping Zaxxon lift Asha. They stumbled through the collapsing station, dodging falling debris and panicked evacuees. As they reached the last escape pod, Horace caught a glimpse of Kravox's unconscious form being dragged away by his remaining followers. The pod jettisoned into space just as the habitat's structural integrity failed. Horace watched through the view screen as the station tore itself apart, scattering debris across the starfield. In the cramped confines of the escape pod, Zaxxon worked feverishly to stabilize Asha. His hands shook as he applied emergency medical protocols. "What was that weapon?" Horace asked, his voice hushed. Zaxxon's eyes remained fixed on Asha's vital signs. "Something that should never have been created. I've doomed us all." As their pod drifted through space, awaiting rescue, Horace realized the battle for peace had entered a new, far more dangerous phase. The lines between ally and enemy, right and wrong, had blurred beyond recognition. And at the center of it all stood Zaxxon, their last best hope for unity, now branded by many as a war criminal. The future of both species hung in the balance, with Asha's life and Zaxxon's conscience weighing heavily in the scales. The escape pod drifted through the void, its occupants tense with uncertainty. Zaxxon's device had bought them time, but at what cost? As they awaited rescue, reports trickled in through the pod's comm systems. The habitat's destruction had sent shockwaves through both human and Pendronian societies. Months passed in a blur of negotiations, rebuilding efforts, and fragile alliances. Zaxxon found himself at the center of it all, working tirelessly to implement reforms that would bridge the divide between their species. Progress came slowly. Each step forward met with resistance from hardliners on both sides. Asha recovered, throwing herself into the work with renewed vigor. Together they became the public face of human Pendronian cooperation. New colonies rose from the ashes of conflict, showcasing unprecedented resource sharing and technological exchange. But beneath the surface of progress, unease simmered. On a sweltering afternoon, Zaxxon and Asha toured a newly established human settlement. The air hung heavy with the scent of freshly tilled soil and construction materials. As they walked, Asha's brow furrowed. "Something's wrong," she murmured, her steps faltering. Before Zaxxon could respond, chaos erupted. Screams pierced the air as colonists collapsed, their bodies convulsing. The security detail crumpled, weapons clattering to the ground. Zaxxon watched in horror as Asha's eyes rolled back, her limbs seizing. "No!" he cried, catching her as she fell. A sickly green mist dissipated on the breeze. Zaxxon's sensors flashed urgent warnings. A highly sophisticated bioweapon, its genetic makeup defying standard countermeasures. In the medical bay of their shuttle, Zaxxon worked feverishly. Asha's vitals fluctuated wildly, her enhanced cellular regeneration now a double-edged sword. The toxin ravaged her system with terrifying efficiency. "Hold on," Zaxxon pleaded, his fingers flying over holographic displays. "I won't lose you again." With a trembling hand, he reached for a locked compartment. Inside lay vials of experimental compounds, fruits of research conducted in defiance of regulations. Zaxxon hesitated for only a moment before injecting himself. Pain lanced through his body as the fringe therapies rewrote his genetic code. Gritting his teeth, he focused on synthesizing the antibodies that might save Asha and the other victims. Hours blurred together in a haze of agony and desperate hope. Finally, a soft chime signaled success. Zaxxon's modified blood held the key to neutralizing the bioweapon. As the antidote spread through the infected population, reports flooded in. The attack had been engineered by a radical sect, their goal to reignite the flames of war. But even as victims recovered, the damage was done. Fear and suspicion once again gripped both civilizations. In the halls of power, voices clamored for a return to isolation. The approach laws, those harsh edicts restricting cross-civilization contact, were dragged from the annals of history and dusted off. Zaxxon stood before the Joint Council, his voice echoing through the chamber. "A temporary sequestration," he proposed, his words heavy with reluctance, "to allow emotions to cool and reason to prevail." The gavel fell, sealing the decision. As delegates filed out, Asha turned to Zaxxon, her eyes blazing with betrayal. "How could you?" she hissed. "After everything we fought for?" "It's the only way to preserve the peace," Zaxxon argued. "We need time." "Time?" Asha cut him off. "While they dismantle everything we've built? This isn't peace, Zaxxon. It's surrender." She stormed off, leaving Zaxxon alone with the weight of his choice. As the civilizations prepared to disengage, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. In the shadowed corridors of the station, Asha's footsteps echoed with purpose. Her mind raced, plans falling into place. She would not, could not, stand by and watch their dream of unity crumble. The hum of the cloaked transporter's engines filled her ears as she punched in coordinates. Outlaw factions awaited, those unwilling to abandon the integration vision. As the stars blurred around her, Asha's grip tightened on the controls. She would see their dream realized, regardless of the cost.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.